In 2022, Brazil was supposed to win the World Cup. Best squad on paper, best striker on the planet. And they lost not because of fitness, not because of tactics, but because of this. A psychological trap so invisible, so deeply wired into the human brain that NASA has documented it, neuroscientists have studied it, and you have fallen into it this week, probably this morning. And once I show you what it is, you will never watch football the same way again. Welcome back, or if you're new here, stick around because this one is different. Every 4 years, we watch the greatest footballers alive absolutely choke. Penalty misses, inexplicable decisions, players who cost 150 million euros frozen like beginners, and the media calls it nerves. Coaches call it bad luck. Fans call it betrayal. But sports psychologists have a different name for it. And understanding it, actually understanding the neuroscience behind it, will change how you perform at work, in competition, in life. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what the trap is and the science that proves it's real, why it hits elite athletes harder than amateurs, how the greatest World Cup performers in history escaped it, and the one mental framework you can use starting today. I'm going to cover this across 4 segments, and I promise you, the last one will genuinely surprise you. Let's go. Let me introduce you to something called paralysis by analysis, or its more precise neuroscientific name, Explicit Monitoring Theory. It was first formally studied by psychologist Dr. Gabriele Wulf and later expanded by Sian Beilock at the University of Chicago, one of the world's leading researchers on choking under pressure. Here's what her research found. And this is wild. When you first learn a skill, kicking a ball, typing, playing piano, your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, is heavily involved. You're conscious of every movement, but as you get better, the skill moves into procedural memory, basically your brain's autopilot. It runs in the background, fast, efficient, unconscious. Now here's the trap. Under extreme pressure like a World Cup final, the brain panics and sends control back to the prefrontal cortex, back to conscious thinking, back to the part of the brain that hasn't been in charge of that skill for years. Beilock's 2010 study showed that expert golfers performed significantly worse when asked to consciously think about their swing while beginners improved. Think about that. The more skilled you are, the more dangerous conscious thinking becomes under pressure. This is why Gareth Southgate's England, arguably their most talented generation in 30 years, keeps losing on penalties. The pressure is so extreme it reboots their brain to beginner mode. But here's what I haven't told you yet. This gets worse before it gets better. Here's something nobody talks about. 4 years. That's the gap between shots. For most players, this is a once or twice in a lifetime opportunity. So what happens to the brain when the stakes are that catastrophically high? Cortisol, the stress hormone. A 2019 study published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology measured cortisol levels in athletes before high-stakes competitions versus training. The spike was, and I'm not exaggerating here, comparable to what soldiers experience before combat. And elevated cortisol does 3 specific things that destroy athletic performance. It narrows attentional focus, so you stop seeing the full picture. It increases muscle tension, so your body literally tightens, and it activates threat response, so your brain shifts from perform mode to survive mode. Now multiply that by this. An estimated 1.5 billion people watched the 2022 World Cup final. 1.5 billion. There's a concept called the audience effect, proven across dozens of studies, showing that being observed by others increases arousal levels, which amplifies whatever mental state you're already in. If you're confident, an audience makes you better. If you're anxious, an audience destroys you. And in a World Cup final, you're not just being watched, you're being watched by your nation, by your family, by history. Roberto Baggio, one of the greatest Italian players ever, missed the 1994 World Cup final penalty. He said in interviews years later, "I still dream about it. I will carry it until I die." That is the weight these players carry into every single kick. Okay, so the trap is real. The pressure is crushing. But here's where it gets interesting. Some players thrive in this environment. Why? In the 2022 World Cup, Kylian Mbappé scored 8 goals. His team lost the final on penalties, and he looked almost calm. In 2018, he became only the second teenager in World Cup history to score in a final, the first being Pelé in 1958. What is different about these players? Sports psychologists call it challenge versus threat appraisal, a framework developed by researchers Andrew Blascovich and Jim Tomaka. When facing high pressure, your brain makes an unconscious evaluation. Players in a challenge state actually have measurably different cardiovascular responses. Their hearts pump more blood, their arteries dilate, their body literally opens up. Players in a threat state, the opposite. Their body prepares to defend, to survive, not to perform. And here's the data that should stop you. A study by Mark Seery at the University of Buffalo found that challenge state athletes outperformed threat state athletes by a statistically significant margin, not because they were less nervous, but because they interpreted the nervousness differently. Mbappe doesn't feel less pressure. He's decided what that pressure means. Which brings me to the most important question of this video. Can you actually train yourself to switch states? Yes. And the method is almost stupidly simple. Alright, this is the segment that separates this video from every other mental toughness video you've ever watched. Because I'm not going to tell you to believe in yourself or visualize success. That's not what the research says. Here's what the actual data says works. Reappraisal, not suppression. Harvard psychologist Alison Wood Brooks ran a study in 2014 where she told anxious performers to either calm down by saying "I'm calm" or reappraise by saying "I am excited." The group that said "I am excited" performed significantly better on singing accuracy, math tests, and public speaking. Why? Because anxiety and excitement have nearly identical physiological signatures. Same heart rate, same adrenaline. Your brain just needs a label. Elite players do this instinctively. Cristiano Ronaldo has spoken in interviews about converting his nerves into what he calls positive tension. The third-person technique, Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan, author of Chatter, found that talking to yourself in the third person dramatically reduces emotional intensity under pressure. Instead of, "I'm going to miss this," you say Cristiano can do this, Kylian can handle this. It creates psychological distance. It activates the same neural pathways as giving advice to a friend, which research shows we do far more clearly than advising ourselves. LeBron James famously used this, literally referring to himself as LeBron in the third person, and people made fun of him for it, but the psychology backs him up completely. Pre-performance routines with a catch. You've heard of pre-performance routines. Every coach tells players to have them, but here's what most coaches don't tell you. The routine only works if it's attention-absorbing, not attention-avoiding. A 2014 study in the Journal of Sport and Exercise Psychology showed that routines which kept athletes focused on process cues, not outcomes, reduced choking by 30%. Neymar's hair routine before set pieces, Ronaldo's run-up and stance. These aren't superstition. They're procedural anchors that pull the brain out of conscious overthinking and back into automatic mode. So the full protocol is, rename the feeling as excitement, not anxiety. Use third-person self-talk to create distance from the moment, and use a process-focused routine to anchor to action, not outcome. 3 steps, backed by peer-reviewed research, used by the world's best athletes whether they know it or not. Now I promised you at the start that this trap affects you. Not just on a football pitch, in your real life, every job interview, every important presentation, every first date, every moment where you really want to perform, your brain runs the same software. Paralysis by analysis, threat appraisal, explicit monitoring of skills that should be automatic. You've been doing this your whole life and calling it nerves or self-doubt or not being confident enough. But it's not a character flaw, it's a brain glitch. And brain glitches can be debugged. The Brazil squad in 2022 didn't lose because they weren't good enough. Neymar didn't miss because he lacked talent. They lost because no one taught them or you that the brain under pressure is a fundamentally different brain than the brain in training. And the players who win World Cups, they're not superhuman. They've just somehow, through experience or coaching, learned to work with their brain instead of against it. Now you know how. So here's what we covered today. The trap, where pressure reboots expert brains to beginner mode. Why World Cups amplify it, where stakes plus audience equals a cortisol catastrophe. Challenge versus threat, where the same pressure gets a different interpretation. The three-part protocol: rename, distance, anchor, and the real takeaway that this is your brain every single day. The biggest insight: nervousness is not the enemy, it's data. Your body is telling you this matters. The only question is what you do with that signal. Rename it, step outside it, anchor to the process. That's how you stop choking an Audi on the pitch, in the boardroom, in life. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below. Which of those 3 techniques are you going to try first? Renaming the feeling, third-person talk, or the process routine? Seriously, write it down. Research shows that stating your intention publicly makes you 2 to 3 times more likely to follow through. So drop it in the comments. Make it real. If this video made you think differently about pressure and performance, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need to hear this.